My talk today is what's your story? And kind of the way I came up with that topic, because I've been thinking for a while, it's like, you know, Neil has spoken, Frank has spoken. What would I do if I had something to say? Terry speaks most of the time here, and I'm always thinking, there are some other ideas that I would like to add to, but is there anything that would make a whole talk? Is there anything that's just not a response to somebody else's talk? But I got to thinking, since I think most of you know I'm pretty active on Facebook. Hmm? What? I what? Yeah, I do eat out a lot. Well, yeah, sometimes I Yelp it or I Foursquare it, these days. Um, I like to eat well. Well, not always. I've been eating at Taco Bell a lot recently. And Burger King this week. But I tried their veggie burger. People are surprised they have a veggie burger. They do. It's not bad. Hmm? Um, it is if you want it to be. But Facebook is designed for people to make connections with people that they know face to face. That's why they call it Facebook. However, a lot of people, including me, have also used it to make friends with people they've never met face to face, that they've only known through Facebook. I don't have a lot of pet peeves on Facebook. Mostly it's like, you guys do what you gotta do. I'm not gonna complain about all the changes because this is free. And this is extra. This is not something mandatory. I go here because I want to. But one of my pet peeves is when somebody sends me a friend request and I have no idea who they are. I have never talked to them. Sometimes I don't even have any mutual friends with them to figure out where did they see me from? And if they didn't see me from, is this just a totally random thing? And I think to myself, just because you're online, does that mean you've lost all sense of manners? This is still real to me. There's a real person on the other side, and I want a real connection. So but I don't want to be rude and just say no straight out without a word, and I don't want to be naive and just be saying yes to every single request. I mean, ultimately, I believe that we are all one, so anybody who sends me a request is ultimately part of the same spiritual family. That's at least in principle, but it's harder to live just in principle, and I kind of have learned that I kind of need to be human in some way, and use common sense and stuff. But so what I generally do is I try to start a conversation with them in private message, and figure the payment to get into my conversation club is one conversation, and I often send them a private message, and I never hear back from them. It's like, okay, fine, you won't talk, then you won't be my friend. At least not on Facebook. In principle, yes, I have nothing against you, but I'm just not going to click that button. So, often a way I would try to start the conversation is ask them, what's your story? And some people are more comfortable with having a conversation. I found that one person that I friended actually admitted that he was not good at conversations, but since he actually made the effort to respond, I clicked yes. But some people don't know how to answer that, and I think that's fair. It's a very open-ended question. It's not like, and even how are you doing? That's kind of open-ended, but as opposed to where you're from, or how old are you, or where did you see me, or what did you like, or whatever. Um, so that's how I came to the topic of what's your story. And that's the story of this talk. But the point that I wanted to make was that in circling with the unity principle of being responsible for our experience is realizing that in each moment we are writing our story. And that's what we were doing together when we were meditating. We're choosing our words, choosing our actions. And if we don't like what we've done before, we can choose differently. And if we don't like the story that's going on in our heads, we can write it differently. But ultimately, I kind of see that there are no stories. A story is like a thread of continuity that I've given meaning to. And having been something of a student of A Course in Miracles for a bit, I resonate with that part that says that there is no meaning but the meaning that I give to it. And so when we realize that, we can realize that if there's something I don't like, I can recreate it. Or I can do something different. But seeing it differently does seem to be the core of it. And I don't think I'm telling you anything new. We've been all here in Unity for a while. You've all heard this before, so I'm kind of preaching to the choir, although I guess we're not in the choir now. Miss those days. But, yeah, so one thing that I thought this would also give me a chance to do is to tell something of my story, because we see each other, we say hello, and we don't always know the stories behind the people we're talking to. And I sometimes like to call us stories on feet. And one thing that I liked kind of seeing in what I was saying about the image I had for O Little Town of Bethlehem was that single little light in the darkness. And something very important happened there in Bethlehem. So the Bible story goes quietly. And that's how I like to think of how my story began. And it began just as anybody else's. I was conceived. And that little light started. And something that was, I guess, the most important first thing that ever happened to me. And it's kind of how I see beginnings. I don't know what how the universe started, so I wasn't, to my recollection, I wasn't conscious when the universe started, but some people say it started with a Big Bang. The Bible says it started with God speaking, but at least what I know biologically, that was my start. And that was my Big Bang. And that was when God said, "Let there be Chris." And there was Chris. And God said, "It's good." My dad never liked when I cried. think the feelings sometimes are things that we skip over. We want to ignore them. We want to fix them. They seem wrong somehow. I guess in one way my crying is a rebellion. Another way, it's just me being me. I don't have to feel ashamed of that. But that was my start. And actually, my favorite psalm is 139. And verse 13 starts, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in a secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. I don't see God the way I used to. I don't see God as something separate from me. I don't see God as a person who is out there who's written my story. But I do see God as the universe. And in that sense, the universe already saw this moment happen now when I was conceived. This already happened when I was conceived. In fact, when I was conceived, happened at the beginning of the universe, if there is a beginning. Everything that came to be, that sperm and that egg, had already been since the beginning. All the matter had already been. I was already here, just not in that form. I don't know about past lives. Sometimes I think of my relatives as my past lives. So my parents are my past lives. My grandparents are my past lives. Because they are parts of me. They are what brings the matter that I came to be now to be. Now, I don't want to knock what people say about past lives. I think there's other things that could be going on, and there are all kinds of mysterious things that, like, wow, that those are connections that I couldn't have explained just biologically. But helping to tell my story would be telling where my parents came from. And my dad was from northern China, and my mom was from southern China. But they didn't meet until they came to Oklahoma. And they met in grad school there. That was 1962. And then they got married in 1966. And they moved to California, where I was born in 1970. And it was close to San Francisco, so I think part of my heart was left back there too. And I kind of think that I'm kind of the most laid back one in my family, and so I think part of me is still Californian and weird like the Californian. But that's when I was born, and my sister came along 2 years later, and then we moved to Maryland, where I grew up. We first lived in Joppatown through elementary school, and then we moved to Bel Air when I was came into middle school, and because my parents felt that Bel Air had a better school district, Joppatown kind of had a lot of drug problems and stuff. But so that's where I grew up, and then I came down here when I began working. So sometimes I like to think how my embrace encircles the world. It comes from China, goes to California, and then comes here. And my grandparents as well have a lot to say, to contribute to who I am. My dad's dad especially, I think. He was a Baptist minister, and he was 6 feet tall, which is pretty tall for a Chinese man. He was also an athlete, and he also had childhood dreams of being a general. And when he was a kid, he would do things like stealing watermelons. And so but instead he became a Baptist minister. But I don't think he totally lost that desire to be a general, because I think he was kind of militant with his family and militant with his faith. And that helped to drive a division in the family. But I think he was a proud man and kind of a trailblazing loner. And so that's still a part of me too. But my dad's mom was a very short woman, very plain, very humble. She didn't like to start arguments with anybody, especially not her husband. And my mom's dad was an English professor who was a principal at 2 schools at one time. Very smart. And he also knew the practice of acupuncture. But my mom's mom, she wasn't quite the plain one that my dad's mom was. I saw a picture of her when she was young, and she was cute. I looked and said, wow. And I understood, had an idea, it's like, that's why my grandfather liked her so much, or at least one of the reasons. But she loved art. And though my parents were very practical people, my dad was an engineer, my mom was a statistician, I always had this side of me that was artistic. But I never quite adopted an art. I kind of came to see myself as a poet, but I haven't written that in a long time. But I see it in the moment, in creating something, and not just doing what I'm told by other people, and not doing what the rest of the world is doing, and not doing what I've done in the past, but doing something new that's built upon what's come before, and creating life as my heart leads, not just how my mind leads. So I started thinking my own way when I was in college, and that's when my life got interesting. And I sort of think that's how I came to be as I am. Because I was diagnosed at age 19 with manic depression, and I was diagnosed at age 22 with Becker's muscular dystrophy. And I don't like to think in terms of blame, but I think it's very interesting that that's when I chose to go my own way with my faith. I was in some ways abusing my freedom at college, and I started writing these kind of charged works, and I kind of decided that the God that I believed in was one where his love was strong enough to reach everyone. There was no exceptions. I didn't believe in hell. There was no permanent place of hell. But how could I express that in my family. We didn't question things. It's really hard in a Chinese family, to challenge authority. And I didn't really get to finding community or start searching for it until I read Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God when I was 28. Up until then, I was trying to find my way in mainstream churches, and the closest thing I could come to finding something new was they would be playing rock songs, which wasn't enough for me. But once I read Conversation with God, it's like, there are other people out there who think like I do. I'm not alone. And I started looking for a community. I went through the Unitarian community for a while, but that eventually didn't completely resonate. I felt like I wanted to seek back in my old faith in a new way, because I felt that there was something that I was missing. Nothing wrong with them. It was just what I was looking for. And it was actually a therapist who recommended Unity, and that was back in 2004, and that's how I came to be here. And that was actually also the year that I came to call myself a Christian again. But I didn't want to call myself something. I wanted to still say that I don't believe the way I used to, so I call myself a Christian pantheist, believing that God is in all things. But Christianity is the path I came to believing that. So that a month later, after adopting that name, that was when I finished burning a Bible that I started burning when I was 19. And it was my statement that I wasn't going to let a book come between me and my bliss. It was my statement that spirit is beyond words. Reality is beyond words. I want direct connection to God. But I've come a long way since then, and Neil has been instrumental in that. Unity has been instrumental in that. Neil would tease me after I told him about this, and he would say, "Oh, you know that book you burned? You might try reading it sometime." No. Yeah. And I still sort of feel the same way about books, in general, but what Charles Fillmore did was redeem that book, and I appreciate him for it. I appreciate Terry for continuing that tradition and helping me to have a space where I can be authentic and read authentically. It's like, and I don't know what happened back then in Jesus' time. I don't trust the Bible, the Gospels, as a completely historical document. I think some things have probably been exaggerated, but not to say that none of it was true. But I can't tell. I wasn't there. But what I know is what's written there. What I know is what I felt when I would read it and what it inspired in me. So in that way, the metaphysical interpretations kind of works for me, because, like, how does it connect to me? And that's the same way for any story that we hear. I love movies, and that's what I do. It's like, which character do I resonate with, or characters, and where do I fit in, and what can I learn? But anyway, that's why I'm here, and I think that went a little long. So that's my story, and I'm not sticking to it.